Hello and welcome. Another exciting episode of Google Developers Live. This is Google Apps Unscripted, Google I/O 2013 edition. And my name is Arun Nagarajan, and we're coming live from the New York studio.
Yeah, hi, and Koleda, also a member of the AppScript developer relations team.
Excellent. Eric and I haven't been on air together in a while. I just realized that I saw ourselves on the monitor here. Super excited to be on air, and in today's episode we're going to, of course, talk about Google I/O 2013, which we just wrapped up last week.
Amazing event, wasn't it?
Amazing event. Still catching up on all the other things that I've missed, but super high energy, really nice to be out there, meet a lot of the developers that work on our product, you folks, and also just to talk to other people that are working on really cool stuff. In today's episode, we're going to focus on recapping the session from last week, the big product launches we had, a lot of really exciting things.
Yeah, it was a good time for AppScript.
Good time for AppScript, as I think last year of I/O was as well.
Yeah.
And most importantly, we want to take questions from you. So there's a Google Moderator link where I think I've already seen a bunch of good questions come up, and we'll also have some live questions towards the end. So please put your questions in Moderator, or be prepared with the questions towards the end. We'll make sure we save plenty of time for that. So first things first, let's talk about all the exciting launches.
Yeah.
So if you've seen our blog posts, I think this went on, the day before I/O. And these were available, I think, a few hours before that even. So the big launches, I think I counted 5 big launches.
Right.
Probably the biggest one was scripts in Google Docs. One of the top requested features for a long time.
Yeah, I think since scripts was in spreadsheets, people naturally thought, why not my docs, right?
Yeah, I think spreadsheets was a really good teaser, and a lot of people saw the power of it, and obviously a lot of spreadsheet-specific use cases still apply.
Right.
But once you have that natural inclination to script and automate things and be able to do stuff with content in a document, you want to do it in Google Docs.
Yeah, and I guess if you used AppScript a lot in the past, you were like, well, there's always been a document app, right? That's been out for a while.
Right.
Not always, but for at least a while now. But I think we took it a step further now, where it's not just that you can manipulate your document, you can actually put scripts within a document.
Right, and a lot of really cool things, and I think we did a really fantastic job with the session as well, where the team showed off a really cool demo that they built. Jonathan Rasher, who was one of the presenters, I think did a terrific job, and Saurabh kind of set the stage for what we've done with the script service here, the document service here, and a lot more to come, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting parts about the new Google Docs integration is the sidebar.
Right.
So we've had the ability to show pop-ups in spreadsheets before and other UI adjustments, but the sidebar, I think, although it's kind of just like a dialogue that sticks to the side, it really opens up a lot of whole new use cases, and we think are really exciting.
Yeah, so I think pop-ups obviously modal, they take you out of the flow if you're a user. Having a sidebar up and having you still be able to work on your content is, I think, really powerful, and the set of use cases that enable is really powerful, and we're super excited to see what you can build with it. So that was a big one. The next one, I know it's near and dear to your heart, is the Forms service. Google Forms, obviously, there was a really good relaunch of that product with lots of new features. In first quarter, I think it was, March, April, maybe even before. I forget the exact date. But the natural inclination, again, was to be able to automate and extend that set of APIs. So we added a brand new service called Forms Service, and also brought in all the capabilities of the UI integration, the trigger capabilities within Google Forms. So you did a session on this, actually.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Me and one of the engineers who builds Forms and has worked a lot on the AppScript side of it as well, we kind of did a co-presentation at I/O about how you can use AppScript and Forms together. And I think Forms, it used to be not its own product, right? It was kind of just a different feature of spreadsheets. And now it's kind of graduated into its full product, an own product. I think it makes a lot of sense. Forms is like really widely used, very popular for collecting data, especially in schools and other organizations. And so now adding scripting to that just made a lot of sense.
Right.
And the Forms app, the Form app that you can use to manipulate forms, we kind of built it from the ground up. It's really good. It's really complete.
I really like the API. It just felt very natural to play with it. Yeah. And we like to call Google Apps as the productivity suite, and Forms make you more productive. And the fact that you can script against these forms, that just takes it off the charts, I think.
Oh yeah, totally.
And I was just thinking about, obviously it's really big in education, and personal use and whatnot. And I just see so many use cases that people have already started to do. And Andrew Stillman's already put out a couple of scripts, I think. It was 2 separate scripts he's already built. So really excited to see where all of that goes.
I think in one of his videos, he described forms as the paperclip for MacGyver.
Yes.
You know, like this tool that you use to get out of any situation.
Every episode.
Yeah. And that's what I think forms is to a lot of teachers. And so having the scripting capabilities just, makes it that much more powerful.
Yeah, and I really encourage you to play with this one. It's really easy to play with. The API is really nicely designed, and I think this, more than anything else, I feel like there's nothing in the UI that you can do that you can't do in the API.
It's true. Yeah, he really made it. Every checkbox, every kind of item, it's in there.
And you'd find it in the place you would expect to find it too, which is the nice thing. The next thing is the new Drive service. So you have probably already seen this as well in your script editor and autocomplete and all that good stuff. We call it Drive App. It's a brand new service that encapsulates the Drive API. So the Drive SDK, which launched last year, provides a brand new way to interact with the documents and files you have in Google Drive. And we now have exposed that API as a service in AppScript. Really powerful, a lot of really nice things. John McGowan, who was a co-presenter with me on a session, we talked about this launch, and we're pretty excited about this one as well.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, in some ways you can look at it and say, I could do that via docs list, right? What's new? I think some of the key things to remember is, while we did have a couple new features, like I think owner manipulation was one of them.
That was a big one.
That was a big one, especially when people, I know a lot of organizations, having people leave and change roles makes it really important to have. But I mean, even just beyond that, I think one of the key things is that in AppScript, we're taking all these other parts of Google and connecting them. And when we change our technology to go onto the latest kind of new underpinnings, so now that we're on the same Drive infrastructure as the external Drive SDK, it makes it so that we can bring in features a lot more quickly. We can respond to feature requests. There's so much more data we can expose to you now. And so we kind of launched, I think, with what was kind of more of a parity version. We wanted to have the same feature capabilities as docs list, give or take. But now we have the ability that if there's like another little bit of information you need from your Drive, from your files, we have a lot easier way to actually bring that to you.
Right. And one of the examples that John gave was the ability to search much more interesting through much more interesting parameters. And DocSys has some search capabilities, but now you can have the same searching capabilities that you have through the Drive API, the one you use HTTP and RESTful services for, in AppScript. So when you're asking for questions on Stack Overflow, there's a wider community of developers that can support you and help you. And like Eric said, when the Drive team makes improvements to their services, a lot of that will now be available in AppScript in more appropriate time frame. One thing I do want to make sure is on the record is that I mistakenly said during my session that docs list was deprecated. It is not deprecated. It is still marked as experimental, and we do recommend you go to the new Drive app API. We think it's really easy to convert your code, but if you're using docs list, it's not deprecated, so I apologize for that confusion. And I know, Eric, you caught up on that right as I said it in my session. But
we're not trying to like make any alarm bells go off, right? You don't need to start rewriting all your scripts today. You know, if you're writing a new script, I would say really strongly recommend you look to the Drive app, because I think it's going to give you the features you need, and maybe even some features that you didn't have before. But for now, everything you wrote will continue to run.
Yep, and I did add a little comment in the video recording of the I/O session that I was wrong about that, so I apologize again for that confusion. Great, so those are the sort of the new APIs that we launched. We also improved some existing stuff. So the big one that I am pretty excited about that really enabled a lot of the cool demos we showed off was the faster HTML service, which comes via an experimental flag around the mode for the sandbox in which your code runs, your HTML code runs. And we call it ES5 or ECMAScript 5. It basically enables strict mode, and you do it through a set sandbox code API call on top of your HTML service output. And it's a really straightforward one, easy to find in your autocomplete, but we also have some documentation we'll show you.
Yeah, so I mean, if you've ever seen us on Apps Unscripted before, you know, every time someone asks an HTML service question or mentions a problem, we usually throw out the word kaha, right?
That's the sandbox.
It's become kind of almost a negative connotation. But essentially, sandboxing we want to keep the user safe from malicious code. What that usually means is that we end up putting a lot of chains around the code that you write. So with this new sandboxing method, it relies much more on native browser features, which means that everything runs faster, there's less restrictions, and generally developing on HtmlService is a lot more friendly now. So we have made it an opt-in for now. We didn't want to force it on people, but we do recommend if you have a script, opt in, just try it on your development mode, for your web app. See if it's, most cases I've seen, everything still runs and it runs faster. And so I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah, and it's required for some, if you want to start playing around with Bootstrap, for instance, some of the layout capabilities that provides and the styling capabilities, it's required for those advanced APIs. And like Eric said, it actually runs faster to most of the scenarios pretty much all scenarios I've tested in. So that's really exciting. Play with it. Let us know what works, what issues you're still having. And we look forward to continue to improve that and providing you more options on that front.
Yeah, I guess we should warn up front that while it does allow things like Bootstrap and other frameworks to work, we know already it's not 100%. So we're really interested in Angular. It's one of my favorite JavaScript frameworks, and there's still some problems there. Now, the team that's still working on all this sandboxing is on the ball. They know about this and they're working on it, but a lot more is possible, but just not everything. So.
Yep. Definitely. Yeah, and we're pushing hard on it. The next one that's also an improvement is the also experimental, I should say, is the improved authorization flow. This is actually one of the things that I've been turning on all my projects, all my new projects. It basically gives you a really nice consolidated authorization screen that the users see, that you as the developer see when you run it for the first time from the script editor, where you no longer have to go through potentially multiple pop-ups that look different. And also, you don't have to run your script again if you're from the script editor. I think you enable this by going File, Enable Authorization, New Authorization Mode, or something like that. I forget exactly what the Upgrade Authorization Experience is the menu option we use. So under File, Upgrade Authorization Experience, we highly recommend you test it out in your test projects. But it's one of those things that I think makes your user more comfortable with your app. It looks like the other authorization screens that they see potentially with Chrome apps and Drive apps and other general OAuth 2 looking screens. It's a consolidated set of scopes that we ask for on behalf of you without you having to work on those scope declarations actively. And I just think it looks a lot nicer.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have some really great engineers. They do not really fit the bill of a UI designer sometimes. So the orange, the red box around the warning panel, or sometimes it's green, or sometimes it's yellow. It's Times New Roman, right? It's not exactly the most appealing. And so I know in the past, the language and the colors and the look have scared some users off. So this new flow goes through standard Google authorization dialogues, and so it looks very, very familiar, very clean, very appropriate.
And another thing I like about it is that you, as the developer, your email address is not exposed. So it's actually a subtle thing, but in the previous authorization screen, it would say last edited by or owned by, in the two email addresses, if not the same, will also be exposed. And with the new OAuth 2 screen, all it says is what the project ID, what the project name is, and what scopes it's requesting for. And I think that's a lot nicer for everyone involved rather than just seeing some gmail.com address. I think so. Yeah, so little subtle things that I think helps both the end users and the developers. So that's one of the things that's really nice. The other thing is that it actually creates a developer console project for you.
I was going to throw that out there. So you don't need a developer console project to use AppScript, but some of our advanced services, we have a URL shortener service, an analytics service, an AdSense service. To enable those advanced services, you do need to have a project. So previously, we'd advise you to go to this other URL and set up your project. Now we are automatically creating a project for you just when you create the script. So there's still a little bit of setup where you need to toggle on and agree to some terms and conditions, but it cuts down the setup a lot, and that's what allows you to hide the email addresses. We're using the name of that console project in order to do the authorization screens.
Right, and this kind of bridges the gap from you now have a script, but you're a professional developer, or you've brought in a professional developer and you want to take advantage of these other Google APIs and services and all of the cool things that you get from the API console. You're able to now bridge that gap from the script editor itself, which I think is great.
Yeah.
So pretty good list of things. So we're pretty excited about it, as you can tell, and I think we showed off all of these in some form or another at Google I/O, and we're really excited to kind of take this further. And I think what we want the most is your feedback, and want to make sure you like what we've delivered and what we can improve, and what are some of the things missing. And we're really looking forward to a lot of that feedback.
Yeah, definitely. And we haven't stopped either. We're still chugging ahead. After we got back from I/O, all the engineers went right back to work working on new features.
Yeah, so I don't think anyone took a day off.
So even with all these launches, we know there's still so much more people want, and even just people have already asked for where can I get the sidebar in my spreadsheet, right?
Right.
And so Jonathan is hard on the case making that happen.
Well, yep. There's a lot of things that we can continue to improve, but what would really encourage us is to see what you're building and the use cases that you are not able to achieve because the small API is missing. So keep sending that positive feedback or constructive feedback over, and we're looking forward to working and delivering on those. Great. So those are the features. Now let's talk a little bit about what we did at I/O specifically. So we had 4 sessions, which is, I think
it's the most we've ever had.
Most we've ever had. Yeah. So really exciting. 3 of them in the Chrome and Apps track, and 1 of them in the YouTube track. So do you want to start off with the 2 that you're most familiar with? The Forms one, which you delivered, and the scripts in Google Docs.
Yeah. So I mentioned the Forms earlier when we talked about Forms. Me and Matt, we presented on Forms, kind of just a good overview of what it means to be integrated into Forms, how the Form app works, some brief sample code to give you a feel of it, and then going into a little bit about why it's useful. We talked a lot about mini workflows, the idea that there's some work you have to do in your organization that's kind of just pushing data around, and why have a human push data when computers can do it. And so we really think having Forms plus scripting allows you to kind of just get people out of the picture to solve these problems. So the demo that we showed off, which I thought was really cool, was around educators. So it was the idea of a quick quiz creator. I think you did a quiz script also. So quizzes are
completely coincidental.
very, very popular use case, and also make great demos. And so our quiz creator allowed you to spin up a form really quickly, email it to students, and then live see their responses as they trickle in. So we have that video up. Actually, all the videos are up now.
That's right.
So for anything we talk about here, you can go watch the full video afterwards.
That's right.
And then I think the other one is the
scripts in Google Docs.
Yeah, the Google Docs presentation. So that was by our PM, Sarab, and also co-presenting with Jonathan. And their presentation was focused around Beepstro. Beepstro is a script that they built that I guess it's a bibliography management sidebar app for Google Docs that was conceived in a bistro, hence Beepstro. And they kind of talked you through how they built it, the technologies they used, and I think they kind of showed off all the different parts. They manipulated a doc, they read a doc, they showed a sidebar, they had a menu item. They really took you through the full suite of functionality.
Yeah, it was one of the live streamed events, and I actually had to watch it live because the room was so packed, and I needed some alone time. But the live stream, I thought it was just such a packed event. There was just so much content. The demo itself was awesome, but then they walked through so much detail about the DOM, or the document object model for Google Doc, the APIs, various APIs to get at and modify, and all the good stuff, and how the sidebar and the menus are injected itself. So I'd highly recommend you check out the videos, and that's the reason why we record them. Is we think even if you were there or you watch it live, I think some of these videos is worth checking out a couple of times because we really do pack in a lot of content.
Yeah, totally.
So the other 2 sessions that both of them I guess I ran. I'll talk first about the one in Chrome and Apps. So this one was all about Google Drive, how you can have a Google Apps Script developed app available in the Google Drive UI, in the Create menu, and then have your app invoked when you click on a file. That's the first part about integrating into the Google Drive UI. And the second part was all about accessing the files in Drive from AppScript. So again, we kind of told the story through an example, through a demo that involved a teacher publishing a Google Docs-based quiz out to a lot of the students. So there's a roster of student email addresses and a template quiz that has, let's say, 5 or 6 questions. The teacher is able to take the set of rosters, the student emails, and then assign each student a copy of that quiz that's shared with only the right person automatically. And then at the end of the deadline, the teacher is able to take away the edit rights from the student and then only make them a viewer. Yeah. So that was kind of a story around teacher kind of publishing and closing a quiz, and then all about all the different APIs around creating documents, managing permissions, all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was working on the quiz script in Forms, I originally tried to do a version where it was like free-form answer, but then there was no way to score it. So I feel like almost like we have complementary quiz scripts, right? Like I could make a multiple choice form and blast that out, and then you could do an essay form, and then they could collect all of those and review them. So
yeah, and that's if you're a teacher, it's a great time to be a Google Apps Script user. So that was really nice set of demos, and John kind of talked through some of the new APIs, including the set owner feature that we added, and the ability to restrict a doc from being forwarded to other people, so only the editor can change permissions. So previously, this was something that you couldn't do through the Docs API, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes, this is just like one extra checkbox or one extra method that we add, but then I forget that sometimes that can completely make or break a use case, right? Yeah. Like having sometimes a student be able to share something out to the world with their friends, I mean, that completely breaks the system. So these things are small, but sometimes really important.
Yeah, and again, goes back to more of the parity with the UI and the API there. So that was really a nice session. And then the other session I did was actually kind of out of the Chrome and Apps track. It was with a new set of developers. Hello all if you're watching, YouTube developers. And it was all about YouTube. We recently announced 1 billion unique monthly viewers, which is crazy. Wow. It's a big number. Unique monthly viewers, 1 billion people. I was blown away by that figure. But those people, they're producing a lot of analytics, and as content creators, you want to be able to manage them, a better interface to look at that data and make meaning out of it. And you don't want to necessarily write a whole separate app for that. And what we came up with was using AppScript to pull the data from the Google Analytics API into a spreadsheet with a set of focus scenarios around, I just want to chart this particular dimension and metric data that's available, or I want to look at this data in a geospatial map, or I want to be able to automate something and integrate something with maybe Twitter analytics data, something like that. So it was just setting a bunch of scenarios and give them some starter code, and it was actually pretty well received, and a whole bunch of developers that had never heard of AppScript now know it exists. And they were all really excited because their business users or non-technical people now have potentially a tool that works in a spreadsheet that they're comfortable with, that they don't have to know all the coding terminology around.
Yeah, I used to think of a spreadsheet as like a way to store data. I've actually come to think of it as almost like a UI builder, right?
A simple application
It's a read-write layer around data, as well as then extra tools for charting and things like that.
Right.
So, when you want to spin up something quickly and you don't want to invest a lot of resources in building a custom app, jumping into a spreadsheet and manipulating, saving, updating, graphing, doing it all there is lowers the kind of like barrier to entry, where you could like get something up in a day, hand it to business folks, and then they can actually start getting value from it immediately. It doesn't take a whole cycle of design, development, review, deployment. Yeah.
Cool. So I think those are some of the things at I/O. Very quickly, I'll also mention some really good partners that were there. Avery Dennison showed off how you could take a spreadsheet and then be able to do a envelope merge out of it. We had HelloFax showing off faxing services from a Google Doc. DocuSign showing off signing e-signature services, and Turnitin showing the ability to take an assignment and submit it from within Google Docs. So thanks to those partners and a few others that were there showing off some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Very quickly, I'll show off where you can find the videos. So we have a playlist here on the screen that shows off all the different videos from Google I/O 2013 with AppScript, and you can find them from our home screen. If you just go to the bottom right corner, there's a playlist that you can say catch up on older episodes. Very easy to find. Highly recommend watching the 4 sessions if you haven't seen them already.
Yeah, that's great.
Speaking of documentation, a couple of pretty exciting things that our tech writer Dan launched right before.
In all of these launches, we did so much launches that sometimes these little things got lost, but I think they're really great. So in addition to just all this new reference documentation around Form App and Drive App and all the new things in Document, we also published just some other great documentation. Some of it is related to these new launches and some isn't. So kind of at the top of your screen here, we have some new quick starts.
Right.
So our goal was to have more of these 5-minute quick starts so that if you're new to scripting, really quickly you can see the power, get some sample code, start playing around. So we have one focused on spreadsheets, which is using some of the technology that's been around for a while. And then another one focused more on forms, but also its integration with calendar, docs, and email. And so it really takes you through kind of a pretty real-life use case, although it's a conference for monsters, maybe not the most real life, but certainly if you replace monsters with something more boring, it would seem appropriate. We also have then some new user guides, one for HtmlService, which we're highlighting here. So we mentioned that the HtmlService, we added some new sandboxing capabilities, but we also realized that it was a bit hard to get started. There was so much text, so much documentation, and so our tech writer Dan did an amazing job of reorganizing it, making it clearer, doing a lot of work to also separate it out into concrete sections. So we think it's the kind of thing you're not going to probably read it every day, but if you give it a read through or if you come back and reference it as you're developing, it's a really great tool for that. And then the other one is for Google Docs. Since we kind of always had this document app, but we didn't ever give you a ton of information about how a doc is laid out and how you manipulated it. We put together, or Dan did, this guide that shows you the structure of a Google Doc, what parts are manipulable, what parts are read-only, as well as a whole bunch of other information about common tasks like replacing text. So if you want to start getting kind of more into docs, doing more doc manipulation, more reading and writing, this is also a great resource.
Yeah, ton of really good stuff. All right, I think we're actually running low on time, which is crazy. I think too much talking. Let's go to questions.
Yeah, but do we have anybody in the Hangout, I wonder?
Any live questions?
Oh, I see someone.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
First, Lenny from Louisiana. First thing, I'd just like to give you all kudos, man. I am not a programmer, and the work I've done with our company has completely changed our operations through using app scripts and Google and all of that stuff. So first off, kudos.
Thank you.
I always have a ton of questions, but I figured I'd just ask y'all one. If is maybe a best practice scenario on pulling data in before loading it into the HTML? So like I've written a couple of the HTML stuff, and they go to a spreadsheet to get the information, and I think that's where a lot of the slowdown is, obviously. Is there a best practice on doing that?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, so definitely spreadsheet reading can be slow, especially if you do it kind of like get range, get value, get range, get value, get range, get value, right? If you get a whole giant range at once and get all the values at once, it can be a lot faster. But even then, it's not a high throughput data store, right? It's not meant to do a ton of reads and writes with a lot of efficiency. It's more, spreadsheets are based around user friendliness, not around kind of speed optimization. So if you are trying to throw some content from a spreadsheet into a UI, it definitely helps to fetch it all at once and then hand it off to your UI. Or you may want to look into other things like using our caching layer with the cache service to perhaps, if you know your spreadsheet data is not going to change during the course that the script is running, kind of maybe throw the data into the cache and then access it via the cache later.
Yeah, so I think the sort of the two high-level bullets that are really important I want to repeat are try to get big chunks at once and then process in memory, and then also use the caching service so that maybe if your spreadsheet's not updating more than once every 2 minutes, put it in the cache for 15, 20 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
All right, let me go to the moderator here really quickly because there are some really good questions in there that I'll kind of skip through here. So question around, the first question was around any more background to the statement to plan for the future, we recommend you migrate to HTML services. I think that statement is still true. We will continue to invest more in HTML service. You saw what we added with the new sandbox capability. We hope to have better documentation. You saw what Dan has done with the new API guides. UI app is not deprecated. UI GUI builder was. So UI app will still be around. So if you have new apps, we highly recommend using HTML service because that's where we're investing the energy. But UI app is still there.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen some of the demos that maybe we showed off during the Google I/O this year in our sessions, some of those things just could not be built via UI apps. So really, we think that HTML service requires a little bit more work, and we're working on making it so that the ramp up time isn't quite as hard.
Right.
And hopefully it'll be easier and easier to use. But we do think that the power it unlocks makes it worth the effort.
Yep, and we'll work on ways to have sort of transition guides. We'll kind of keep working on that informally as well. So some of the things around, you don't get the same, the next question is about not getting the same options in get events versus get events by series ID. It is a known limitation at this point. We're investigating, I should say, moving to a new calendar API. There's some new options available to us in the back end. So we're going to investigate that, and hopefully that'll enable some of these new APIs.
Yeah.
Nothing to announce at this point, but point taken. The next one's actually one of my favorites is the messages. The error messages today are not so helpful. This gentleman or lady writes here around so when something wrong happens, something bad happens. So there are a couple of things you can do. I mean, in your code itself, you can do a better job of having some more try catches, especially in the hot areas where if you're doing a lot of file writes, maybe try to have that on try catch so you know what is failing. So the try catch works. It's just standard JavaScript, so that's a really good way to do it. And besides that, we know we have some work to do as well.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is that if you one day one of our lead engineers drew a system diagram of how AppScript works, and the number of boxes and systems on the whiteboard that day was overwhelming. So we connect to so many systems, and if one of them has an unfortunate outage for a little bit of time, we get an error. Now, if we gave you that message doesn't provide you any meaning, right? It's some internal message about an internal system. So a lot of times we just wrap it all up in server error. And I know that feels really frustrating, like, why does everything say server error? That's not telling me anything. But whatever we told you would be just as meaningless, right? The random backend name of some tool we use, it's not going to give you the information you need. And a lot of times, if it's a server error, we're saying it's our fault. We're sorry, but it's not probably a mistake that you're making in code. So I think you're spot on. You can identify what portion of your code is throwing that error, so perhaps you can work around that for the time being, or take it out of your flow. But
and there might be an issue you identify, and that'll be really helpful to us when you log it in the issue tracker, if you can isolate the area that is potentially throwing an error. So if you're weaving drive calls with calendar calls, with translate calls, there might be certain things that may break, but if you're writing a code in a way such that you're able to trap that yourself, that'll really help us and I think yourselves as well.
Yeah.
Next question, any plans on integrated HTML GUI builder? As of now, no plans. Our goal is to support the most popular HTML capabilities. So there are plenty of other really good GUI builders out there. Our hope is that by supporting the standard, you're able to bring your own tools and use what you're already familiar with or is your favorite.
Yeah.
Would you?
Yeah, I mean, spot on. I mean, I think we're thinking that AppScript, our real power, what people love about AppScript, is the ability to go right to your Gmail, right to your calendar, right? So we're putting more of our efforts into doing what we do best, and we think that there's so much evolution in the web, in design, in UIs. Like, let's use the best of what's out there and bring that into AppScript, rather than for us to invent another builder and then, it be some new way you have to learn how to do things, right?
So in other words, we want to invest in making sure there's no server error messages, more so than an integrated GUI builder.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other good tools out there.
Do you want to just maybe check back to the Hangout in case there's someone else live? I don't want to leave them hanging.
Anyone else live on the Hangout with any questions? Any questions so far? Okay, great. Let's go down the list. Quite a set of interesting questions here. Next one's around the data validation API, which was available briefly and then killed a few weeks before I/O. I wouldn't say it's killed. So as you could probably imagine from that, that we're still working on it, and keep an eye out. It's something that we're looking on.
People have been asking for data validation features in the spreadsheet app for a long time, and so this is a hint that there's something cooking. Unfortunately, it kind of got thrown out there a little too early, and so we had to reel it back in. But I think just keep your eyes out.
Sounds good. All right, let me see. Next one here is about being able to append content directly to the sidebar. So once the sidebar is displayed, there's no good way to add content to the sidebar. So you can either have the sidebar itself aware of where to get the content from and using HTML or JavaScript to append content to it, or you can have a reference to what is displayed manually, as this question indicates, and then update it and then re-show the sidebar. As of now, there's no good API to append or update already open sidebar.
Right, and I think that's part of maybe the difference in flow between a UI app world and an HTML service world. In UI app, your server code would do some manipulations and then throw a new version out there to you, right? Return an updated app. In HTML service, what we want you to do is, rather than your server throwing code to the client has JavaScript on it that uses Google Script Run to reach back to the server, pull out a fresh copy of the data, and display it.
Yeah.
And so we're working on making it so that hopefully someday you won't have to do polling and constantly keep checking your backend. But for now, it's a really powerful way to have a really responsive UI too, right? Because UI app, you had to kind of wait for the backend.
Right.
Now you can do nice little spinners. People love spinners and always had problems with spinners in UI app.
And timers.
Timers, yeah.
So you can say every 5 seconds check for something. Those are things not possible in UI app. All right, let's see here. Next question is, any way to get the footer of a document so I can remove page numbers from the first page or all footers linked into a single template? It's a good question. Do you know the answer to this?
Well, I do know that in the model, and I think if you have the model up there still in the document guide, there is a difference between the body, the header, and the footer. Unfortunately, I haven't played with the footer that much.
Yeah.
So I don't know if things like page numbers, you can get to them or remove them. It's certainly, I can see why it'd be useful.
Yeah, so if you find something missing here, please feel free to log a feature request on our issue tracker.
Yeah.
Next one, 2 quick ones here. Being able to access table of contents, I don't think that's possible today.
I think you can read them, read their existence, but not exactly the list inside of it, and I don't think you can add them today.
Right. Again, if there's really good use cases, please put it in the issue tracker.
I think what we're going to see is that now that you can put scripts directly into a doc, people are going to be exploring the doc a lot more deeply than they did before. A lot of times people would just dump a couple paragraphs in there and then email it to somebody.
Right.
I think people are going to get a lot more fine-grained, and so we know that you're probably going to dust off some areas that we didn't quite nail it down.
Right. Could I create a concept form through new Google Forms with the AppScript HTML service, or dynamically show next questions? So you can, Google Forms has its own set of UI, so you cannot actually use Google Forms with HTML service like this question describes. They're kind of separate technologies.
Well, I think if I'm reading that one correctly, it's something that may be possible. And actually, I think Matt, the engineer, has even thought about it or tried it out once, which is to build a form in Google Forms, then not actually show it via Google Forms, but read its data out and then display an equivalent form via HTML service. So kind of like using the forms designer, but not the forms displayer.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's pretty on the edge. I would not say this is something that we've tried a lot, or we recommend that you could do it and it would be fully successful. There may be some issues there, but I guess the idea is you could design a form by the designer, and that just gives you some model, and then you can do whatever you want with that model. You could display it as HTML. You could put it in any kind of format you want to. So.
All right, we really should wrap up here. We've kind of gone over time. A lot of good questions. We had a lot of content. So apologize for going over by a little bit. Let you guys get back to work or sleep or breakfast, whichever time zone you're watching us from. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for all the support around I/O. We're super excited to see what you can do with these new APIs and services.
Yeah, that was great. And we'll see you for future episodes of Google Developers Live.
Thank you.
Thanks.